Hi, I wanted to talk to you today about contiv VPP and provide a demonstration. This is a new Kubernetes CNI network plugin so that it allows you to build a network of pods within a cluster. A couple of unique things about it. Number one, it uses the FDIO data plane within each contiv vSwitch. And number two, it has a way of mapping Kubernetes policy and service traffic through the network of FDIO enabled vSwitches. Here's our 3-node network, a master and a couple of worker nodes. You can see that we have a vSwitch installed on each of the nodes. We've got several Nginx application pods connected to each of them. We're going to use this user interface to give you an idea about what it does and what it looks like. All right, let's get started. All right, I brought up my contiv VPP user interface. So we have our little topology graph right here. I can move things around. I can stretch it out if I need to. I can zoom in. If you'd like, zoom out. I can click on a particular node, and over here you see this little slide out that shows the node ID, host IP address. I can do that for the different workers as well. Here's a table of my nodes, and as I sift through them, I can sort of see them light up, which could be a nice way of looking at things if you've got a lot of nodes in your network. All right, another nice capability here is the ability to sort the topology by namespace. So these are all of the pods that belong to the Cube system namespace. Quite a few of them. I can do the same for another namespace, in this case the default namespace. I mentioned earlier that we've got 5 application pods, one connected to the master, a couple each to each worker. So that's a nice capability, I think. You can also look at all of the pods in the network. So this is the entire network. Some are connected to the master node. Some are connected, obviously, to the worker node. vSwitches are contained in each node, and they're lit up or sort of identified by the red boundary. So these are all the pods in the network. If I want to click on a pod, I get some slide out information about that. I can also list all of the pods in a table. You can sort by node, so as I sift through the different master node pods, they light up. Worker pods as well. Showed you earlier you can sort by namespace, so here's our default pods in our default namespace. So that'll help you identify those. Let's jump over to the contiv section. Now this pretty much just focuses in on the contiv VPP specific aspects of the solution. So we've got our 3 vSwitches. I can single click on those and I get some information that pops out. I can get into a little bit more detail. In this case, it's the interfaces. Some are local interfaces directly connected to the vSwitch. Others are VXLAN or tunnel interfaces leading to remote pods, or excuse me, remote nodes with pods that are part of the same network. Again, if I have containers in this particular pod, a vSwitch pod, I can gather that information there. We can also look at the application pods that are part of that. Oops, let me just get over here, and there we go. So these are the application pods that are part of this particular network. Now this is something I like. I like to get some information about an interface between a vSwitch and the application pod. So over here on the right, we've got our vSwitch addressing interface, and over here on the right we've got that related to the Nginx application pod. So if you're looking for some more details there, that's a pretty nice feature. Okay, let's jump over to the network overlay. In this case, we're dealing with a bridge domain. So here we've got our 3 nodes. We have our application pods connected to each of the contiv vSwitches. I don't know if you can see that, but those are sort of dimmed out. Again, I mentioned earlier there's 1 on each node in the network. Here's a summary of this particular environment. By node, you've got the BVI address, VRF, the VNI, we're talking a single VNI in this full mesh of tunnels, if you will. The pods connected to each vSwitch, excluding those on the master related to core DNS. Here are the pods that are part of this network or connected to this network, and then the tunnel information as well. So I can see I can light up those different tunnels depending on where they originate and where they go to. Now if I want some more detailed information about this, I can click on sort of our virtual BVI interface, if you will, and you can see that I've got some information about the different VXLAN tunnels that originate from this particular node and take me to the remote nodes. And I can do that for each of the different nodes in the network. All right, so that's the network overlay. Now I'm going to take a little detour here and go to my trusty contiv netcuddle CNI. Now, if you're into, if you're into the whole kubectl CLI, you've got that here as well. Obviously if you're used to that, that's great. But there's some additional commands related to contiv VPP, and so that's those are kicked off by contiv-netcuddle, and you get some different kinds of information, again, related to this particular solution. So the different IP addresses for a particular node, the build version of the software. With pods, I'll get a bit more information about what's going on out there, what the network looks like. Here's the pod, and then here's the node, and then all of the different pods associated with that particular node. So that's a nice handy little feature if you feel like you have to get your CLI on. All right, let's go to services. You may have one or more services in your cluster. Here's a pull down of all the different services. We can list all of them. Nice little table pops up. Name of the service, namespace, the different labels, cluster IPs, different ports, so on and so forth. So there's 4 services running. 3 of them are sort of system related, but here's Nginx. This is our application specific service. So here's our service. We can show the endpoints of that service, which can be real nice in terms of tracking who is what, who's servicing what at a particular point in time. Here are the IP addresses. This will be important in a moment. I can show these on the topology. So all of the application or service endpoint pods, if you will, are lit up. Everything else is dim, so it can sort of give you a perspective as to what endpoints and how many you have for a particular service. All right, back to the show services part. Now, I mentioned earlier that policies and services can be mapped to VPP. So in terms of services, VPP handles this, or contiv VPP handles this through the use of a high performance NAT function. So you can see by pulling out the VPP NAT state in a particular vSwitch, the service that is being supported. So here we go. We've got our default namespace. Our service is Nginx. Here's the cluster IP address and port number. And then if you look here, you have all of the different endpoints that are communicating or can be reached through that particular cluster IP. And each of these IPs matches a particular endpoint in the table that is shown right here. All right, that's about it. Again, you've got the ability to look at the Kubernetes topology, topology end nodes, contiv VPP specific information, the overlay that contiv VPP builds, services, we know about those, and then your contiv netcuddle CLI terminal. That's it. Thanks very much for watching.